So welcome to the intersection of technology, science, and cannabis panel. Before we get started really quick, I just want to let everybody know that in East Hall A right now, there's an important conversation happening called Weed 2, Women in Cannabis, Women Who Make Change. It's really important that as we continue to build this industry, we have a chance to make this a really large, a really profitable, and a really powerful industry that's built on integrity and inclusion. And in order for that to happen, and in order for us to do it right, we need to create space for everybody in this industry, all genders, all ethnicities. By doing that, we're not taking anything away from anybody else. All we're doing is creating space at the table for everyone. And I would encourage everyone to go to Ophelia Chong's talk at 2:15 in the Grand Ballroom on equity, inclusion, and diversity in the cannabis space. With that, we're going to start talking about science and technology in cannabis. So we have an awesome panel for you today. We have some of the smartest people that I've ever met. They are way smarter than me, so I'm going to do my best to try to corral them into something that I can understand, and we're going to learn about a lot of different cannabis subjects. So directly to my right, we have Dr. Richard Kaufman. Dr. Richard Kaufman is a distinguished scientist and respected researcher. Dr. Richard Clark Kaufman is the Chief Science Officer and co-founder at Nanosphere Health Sciences, the nano biotechnology company behind the cannabis brand Evolve Formulas. Dr. Kaufman invented the company's disruptive Nanosphere delivery system. Their patented smart nanoparticle products deliver cannabis phytochemicals, there's going to be a lot of big words today, so strap in, by transdermal, intraoral, intranasal administration with rapid effects, greater activity, and precise dosing. So that's Dr. Richard Kaufman, everybody. Next to him, we have Len May. Len May is the CEO and co-founder of EndoCanna Health, a biotech research company specializing in personalized medicinal cannabis, using DNA sequencing, and parent company of the Endo DNA Test Kit, the most comprehensive personalized cannabis DNA test and available on the market today. With over 25 years of experience, Len May is a pioneer in the medical cannabis industry, having held positions such as the president of the Cannabis Action Network and board member and lifetime member of the California Cannabis Association. Len May. Next to Len May, we have, oh man, I should have asked you how to pronounce this yesterday during our meetup. Michael Trzeski. Did I do okay? All right. Michael is the CEO and co-founder of Vapium. He's a physicist, patent agent, and award-winning inventor who's also a specialist in robotics. That wasn't in his bio. I just learned that about him yesterday, and I think it's very cool. Next to Michael, we have Dr. Kent Crowley. Dr. Kent Crowley was the founding partner of Troche Inc. and the inventor of the Troche, an internationally patented cannabis lozenge for buccal absorption. Co-founder and chief medical officer of the Palliative Care Corp in Huntington Beach, working with patients to incorporate cannabis therapy into their disease state management and to publish relevant research on the safety and efficacy of cannabis in medicine. Dr. Kent Crowley, everybody. And then we have Julianne Tutel, co-founder and VP of Product Development at Kinslips. Julianne joined the cannabis industry in 2013 to focus on sublingual products as a method of cannabis consumption. Throughout her career, Julianne has worked in many different aspects of the food industry where she gained an expertise in food processing, safety, distribution, and logistics and product development. That's Julianne Tutel, everybody. And I am Josh Kirby. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Kinslips. All right. So we're going to start the panel today with a little audience participation. Everybody raise your hands if you think strains are bullshit. Yeah. All right, we got a consensus on the panel about strains not being up to snuff. What's going on with strains? Why don't we start with you, Mr. Len?
I was talking to, first, I just want to say, I never take these things for granted. I've been doing this for so long, and it's such an honor to be surrounded by all these people on the panel, have the opportunity to be at a conference speaking about cannabis. 10, 20 years ago, this would be unheard of. So I really don't take these opportunities for granted. I appreciate New West Summit, everybody puts this on. Each and every one of you is here supporting the cause, and we're doing something great, and I've seen this come a long way, and I just want to make sure that we continue going in that direction. Give yourselves a hand. Thank you. So, strains. So I was talking to the great Dr. Ethan Russo, and Dr. Ethan Russo told me that strains relate to viruses. So how do we call this, cannabis? What is that? So he suggested we use chemovar instead of strains. So strains, if you look at historically, these chemovars have been cultivated in different regions and different climates. They have morphed and mutated over the years and have produced different types of terpene profiles. So we talk about indicas and sativas, but what we're looking at is the exact ratio of all these different chemicals and all these different substances that are in this plant. So to call something an indica or sativa or indica dominant, all that stuff, we're really selling this plant short because it has so many different properties. And what we want to look at is ratios. The way I look at it is you have a ratio of cannabinoids, you have terpenes, you have all these other substances. So if we're going to call this plant a strain, we're really not doing it its justice.
Yeah, and so, Dr. Kaufman, what happens when we kind of minimize what those cumulative compounds are and start calling them strains and assigning them names and marketing there? What are we really missing out on when we do that?
One thing you're missing out is standardization. The fact that if you have a strain, alleged strain of a certain type of cannabis grown in one region at one time of year, may have a completely different profile of terpenes and cannabinoids, and the industry, for the most part, does not test fully. In fact, they don't test terpene profiles. They follow the legal minimum of testing maybe THC, CBD, look for microbiological contaminations. So even if you started with this strain and consider it bullshit or not bullshit, you have to then therefore look at all the different phytochemicals present in that strain. And then you get into the fact that by inhalation, you'll get the whole profile. But as we develop into a more pharmacological, pharmaceutical preparation, we need to be able to extract or distill out or pull out the particular cannabinoids that are in their ratio, measure them, and put them in a delivery system. And the fact of extractions is very difficult. One of the things I'll point out is decarboxylation. When you decarboxylize cannabis, heating it to a certain temperature, to activate from THCA to THC, you lose your terpenes. So then people say, aha, we will mix terpenes together and put them back in. It doesn't always work that simple. So the phytochemical aspects of over 450 of them, and some maybe don't have as much value, is of most interest in how you maximize, for example, by his system of testing, to determine what cannabinoids, what terpenes from the plant you want to have, and use them maybe by themselves, but even with other nutraceuticals from other plants, and create kind of holistic products that we specialize using different types of delivery technologies.
Great, that's awesome. Dr. Kent, in your work with Troche, how do you kind of break apart the concept of the strain using science and technology to apply a targeted dose or a targeted formulation for a patient? What do you do that's special in your process for that?
Well, it's been a challenge to try and attempt to keep a product and a specific SKU consistent across state lines. Challenged with the process of extraction. Some states allow certain types. In Nevada, where we have complete control of both cultivation and production, that is a very simple thing for us to accomplish, whether we're ignoring one of the main actives, CBD, and we're pushing dosing on a neutral form of THC and its associated minor cannabinoids and terpenes. We adjust those terpenes to attempt to standardize by adding back cannabis-derived terpenes. And we can do that across state lines now. Initially, several years ago, it was very difficult to control, not being a cultivator, my sourcing in California. And so we moved towards a distillate and then essentially rebuild the components so that we could meet the stated potency, goals that we're looking for.
So in an industry that's developing the way that it is at the time that we're at, you know, as technology is kind of catching up to the need of the industry and the understanding of where we are, how do you try to find, how do you deal with not having the most pure form of the medicine that you're trying to deliver, and how do you compensate for that when you are on one hand selling a medicine to someone, on the other hand trying to sell a predictable recreational experience? You know, how do you kind of balance those things out? Is it through delivery methods? Is it through reintroduction of terpenes? How does that work? Jules, do you want to comment on that?
So at Kinslips, in order to create a repeatable experience, we start with a cannabinoid that is as pure as it possibly can be, and we work with several different cannabinoids. At that point, we then reintroduce terpenes. We're working with botanically sourced currently, and a lot of that has to do with sourcing. As you mentioned, it's hard to find reliable sources that can often provide the amount and purity levels that you need to put into your product, given the stringent testing that we go under in the California market. Once we add terpenes back in, we also use technology to encapsulate and create a cannabinoid and terpene liposome so that the delivery method is more effective, making it more bioavailable. So through the sublingual absorption, you're capturing more of those cannabinoids, which allows for you to do more with less.
Thanks. Do you have anything you want to add, Dr. Kaufman?
You know, in our approach to the world of cannabis delivery of products, I mean, we look at both the recreational and the medical market. So when we're looking at medical, we're looking particularly at particular cannabinoids with research, ratios of the other cannabinoids, as well as the terpenes. So given whatever plants we have, we'll apply whatever extraction, distillation technologies we are to get those precise amounts of those particular cannabinoids and terpenes who are going to be as pure as possible in their purest form, and then we basically apply our nanotechnology to that to encapsulate them into our patented phospholipid membrane with about 130 nanometers in size. This is a nanogel. They end up looking like this. So that allows us to have, in a microliter dosages, exact amounts of whatever cannabinoids, whatever terpenes you need for a medical problem. And that can be adjusted for whatever the conditions are. But then we also look at how we deliver them. We have developed 3 methods of delivery. We can go transdermally, which is very good for certain skin conditions, arthritis, localized pain. We get localized effect as well as central nervous system effects. We're going orally between the cheek and the gum, and recently we're going intranasally, bypassing the blood-brain barrier, N2B, which is about onset of actions in about 90 seconds, very pure. But for recreational, we're creating an experience. Now, that's a very challenging thing, because people look at the experience coming from a plant that they have smoked. So how do you reduplicate those finite qualities of the plant in however you make it? And that's the tricky part, because I don't believe you basically can take all the pieces apart, like Humpty Dumpty falling off the wall, and put it back together. I think you can do things like subcritical CO2, where you pull off the terpenes, then do an extraction of ethanol, pulling out all the cannabinoids and reintroduce them back. If you have analyzing from there, maybe you spike certain of the individual terpenes. I think in our testing, we've identified ones associated with certain types of strains. So then we can mix and match and hopefully deliver them in different ways that reduplicate the experience that people are used to having experienced when they're at inhaled cannabis.
Right, and largely experiences are a subjective thing.
Oh, they're
that's
very
a really
subjective.
hard thing to promise one thing, and however someone experiences it is how they experience it. You can't argue with that.
Yeah.
That's a challenge. So Michael, you are the only person on the panel who deals in vaped or smoked cannabis, inhaled cannabis. Can you tell us how you, through your work, how you deal with the problem of delivering a precise experience or a precise treatment?
It's a very good question. So my name is Michael, and we have 3 brands, and one of them is Vaping, which is a recreational leaf brand, which is for regular leaf, and that's basically very much strain-based. We have also a vaping medical division, so we have an office as part of Johnson & Johnson J Labs in Toronto. And for us, with the big thing is we believe that dosing and data are the differentiators. So for us to figure out what a measured dose of cannabis is really important. Right now, there's a lack of a lot of data on what is a dose of cannabis. We know, for example, in a form factor that if I take a Tylenol for a headache, I know that there's one pill, I take 1 or 2, or Advil, whatever it is, I can get rid of my headache. But then how do you similarly dose cannabis? So some of my colleagues here have been talking about we can recombine the cannabinoids and build a good foundation, the THC-CBD ratios. Those are really important. And once we have a stable building block, for us, it's a combination of a hardware device as well as a software app that can track your dosage, usage frequency, and the efficacy. So the hardware device, similar to Fitbit, tracks your usage, tracks how much you're using, and tracks your dosing. The reporting on the efficacy is up to the patient or the user. They can report through the app how do they make them feel. So for example, if I have a headache, I can take a dose of cannabis, I report back to the app, was my dose effective? Did it alleviate my symptoms? If not, you can take another dose. And then we have a back end, which is doctor facing, which the doctor can look at your treatment protocol and see, okay, is this treatment effective? Do I have to change the dose for my patient? Do I have to change the building blocks, the THC CBD ratios going into the formulation? And so this is what we have with a technology called SmartFlow, which is the meter dosing system for dosing extracts. We also have a leaf dosing system too, which relies on packaging the cannabis in a certain form factor where you can then pretty much rely on strains because we can't, it's very hard to homogenize a bunch of leaf. A strain A from a certain grower will be different than strain A from another grower. They'll have different THC CBD ratios. So those are two solutions where we believe that through vaporizing, it's an effective way of delivering a metered dose to the patient or the recreational user.
Awesome. That sounds great. So one of the things we were discussing yesterday that I found really interesting was that there's a lot that is becoming known about cannabis right now, but because of the war on drugs and because of the sort of prohibition on research, innovation, understanding, all of the innovation and invention in the cannabis industry has been stifled for years. And so what companies like all of your companies are doing are trying to catch up and get ahead of the curve so we can deliver the experiences and treatments that consumers expect from every other industry. I think, Len, the approach that your company is taking is a really interesting one to try to get ahead of that research and try to understand how we can target experiences and medications more precisely. Can you talk about how it works a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So my colleagues have discussed about the plant itself and different methods of consumption and the components of the plant. But there is an important factor, which is the human being, the person. So what we feel is cannabis is a personal experience. And it's not just what we feel, it's what we know from our experience and other people's experiences. But your DNA plays a big role in how you will experience cannabis. And it's not a consistent thing, meaning that just because you have a genetic propensity towards something, your environment, many other factors can trigger the expression of that gene. So what we do is we have a test basically that is sort of like a 23andMe of cannabis, where you swab the inside of your mouth, you send it over to our lab, we'll do a genetic sequence, and we'll show you your potential genetic expression as it directly or indirectly relates to your endocannabinoid system, and symptomatic conditions like anxiety, depression, that can be triggered by using a certain type of cannabinoid terpene profile. So what we do as far as research goes, just to go back to that, one of my pet peeves is that we always saw there's not enough research, which is absolutely true. There's over 15,000 different studies, essays, trials, articles that are in PubMed alone on cannabis. We've been doing research for years. Our government just suppressed that. We are playing catch up because of the fact that in order to do real trials, we have a lot of hurdles to overcome. And when we do overcome that in this country, we're still stuck with using cannabis that's grown in Mississippi that doesn't even contain the type of ratios that we would get in any dispensary at the least expensive level of cannabis. So we took our research to Australia. So we're participating in 6 different clinical trials where people are going to be using our genetic kit as a baseline. And what we're trying to do is to see, okay, you have your potential genetic expression. What we want to do is try to avoid a negative experience. So when we give you a roadmap of what you should follow, the roadmap has potholes in it. So if you have an enzyme deficiency that doesn't allow you to be able to metabolize THC through your digestive system, and you're going to consume an edible, guess what? You're going to have a negative experience every single time you consume that edible. Isn't that something you'd rather know in advance than go to a dispensary and say, I'm going to try this one didn't work, I had a bad experience, I'm going to try another one, and keep using this method? So the goal is, and we're only as good as the research that's available. So my whole thing is I urge every single person out here, the scientists, to keep continuing the research, keep posting it, because as we continue with the research, those studies will change, they'll modify themselves, and we are behind. And there are other countries like Israel, for instance, that is federally legal. They have a federal program, Canada as well, but federal program in Israel is controlled through the government, through the physician. They look at your efficacy, they look at your treatment plan. That is the type of research that we need, and the more research that's published, the better we can all do with the products that we're developing.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So one of the challenges for developing new products or understanding what you're putting out into the market is that access to studies is pretty limited. Dr. Kent, I know that you are currently working on a study or have done studies in the past. Can you talk a little bit about how that process works, what's involved with it, and the kind of information that you get out?
Certainly. I have the privilege of getting to actually use cannabis in a functional medicine practice. That's one of the areas of medicine that I've been involved in for well over 20 years, looking at lifestyle, looking at genetics, and the impact on disease states or even performance for an athlete. Stepping into the cannabis space, just about 5 years ago. I thought it was a gateway drug before that. We set up 2 years ago, or actually January of 17, a clinic in Huntington Beach where we've treated well over 2,000 patients now. We started collecting data, not sure knowing what was going to result from that data collection, but it became very apparent to me very quickly how profoundly valuable this cannabis, an adaptogenic herb, was in treating all types of conditions. We see mainly probably 60% of our patients are pain. They're looking for a opiate alternative solution. Many of them are cannabis naive. They haven't consumed cannabis at all, or they've consumed cannabis at in high school or college. Autoimmune disease, cancer, a lot of psychological conditions, including autism. Anxiety is one of the top ones that cannabis has a profound effect on. So we started realizing this from the data that we were collecting, and we did 2 studies which ultimately were published last August in Frontiers in Neuroscience. And we looked at the impact of the troche, which is a patented buccal delivery system. Anyone knows what buccal is? It's actually placement, and we got one.
You might want to dive into that a little bit.
It's placement in the mouth. So sublingual, everyone knows, generally goes under the tongue. Well, depending on the dosage assembly, the form, and what your goal is attempting to do, mine was, with this dosage form, to minimize between patient variables. Granted, there's genetics involved that we can look at, and this is really across all medical disciplines. This is where science is taking this information and giving us warnings on things to avoid. But in this delivery system, buccal is between cheek and gum, and placement in the mouth can affect how much saliva is produced. So if we think about putting something in our mouth for avoiding first pass effect, that means anything that goes down, you swallow, goes into the GI tract, and then all that blood is routed through the liver, and that's called first-pass metabolism. Generally, all the other routes of administration, topical, intranasal, oral, buccal, sublingual, rectal, vaginal, these are all bypassing first-pass metabolism. And so I wanted to minimize between-patient variable, optimize how much medication got into the system, we call that term bioavailable, and actually play around with the pharmacokinetics, how something is absorbed into our body, distributed throughout our body, metabolized, and eliminated. With knowing that, standardizing the dose, giving it to patients on a protocol basis, we were able to see that about 84% of patients with chronic non-cancer pain lowered or discontinued their opiate dose on their own with the simple guidance of saying, you know what, stay on your medicine, we're going to add cannabis, we're going to start with CBD so we avoid the, some of the risks unless there was good history of using THC in the past without any side effects like paranoia, and report back using a numeric analog scale, 0 being known pain, 10 being unbearable pass-out pain. And what we found, and has been corroborated in other studies, one coming out of Israel with Dr. Meshulam this year, was that there is a consistent 4-point drop. We observed 4.9 drop in that numeric analog scale. Now, with a patient that's told, take this medicine, and if you don't feel the need to reach for that OxyContin or the Vicodin or the Norco, don't take it, and only take it when you need to. And with that simple instruction, patients stopped consuming opiates and replaced them with something that gave them a better quality of life, 100% reported, better quality of life. Less side effects, constipation went away, in appropriate dosing, they were able to function better, move better, even if their numeric analog score didn't change at all. They still felt like they had a better quality of life.
That's amazing.
And that is
That's
wonderful
really
with
amazing.
cannabis.
Yeah, that's awesome. So there's a really important word in there that I want to make sure everybody understands. Raise your hand if you know what bioavailability is and what it means. That's great. If you're sitting next to someone who doesn't know what that means, it's your job now to teach them after this panel what that word is. It's one of the most important words in cannabis consumption, in delivery methods, and it's very misunderstood. So please do everybody a favor, do the whole industry a favor, and teach people about that word. Just to help out, Jules, do you want to deliver a quick pitch on what bioavailability is?
Sure. So bioavailability, I said this a little bit earlier, you're basically maximizing how medicines and other compounds are getting into your body so that they are most effective in their delivery. Depends what you're treating for, what bioavailability consumption method you're targeting, buccal, sublingual, intranasal, all of these types of things, vaping. All of these things deliver different bioavailability opportunities. And so what you want to look for in your cannabis products and as you're developing products is you want to, I think the standard in the industry has been, hey, 10 milligrams, that's a dose. And that has standardized how people consume cannabis over the last few years. What we've talked about up here is that 10 milligrams isn't the end all. In fact, it's the very, very baseline. What you can do with a more bioavailable product with 2 milligrams would be the same that you could do with a product that doesn't target bioavailability in 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams, 100 milligrams. All of those different things play into how bioavailable your product is.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Kaufman, one of the most interesting things that I find about your work is this intranasal delivery system, and it has a huge impact on bioavailability. Can you talk a little bit about how that works and like what it is?
Yes.
I imagine you're just spraying cannabis at your brain, but I know that that's not right.
Okay, before I go into that, we are one of the few companies who has done pharmacokinetic testing into the blood with humans. GW Pharma has done it. We compared our product to GW Pharma's. This was a study we published. It's available online. It's like the holy grail of showing bioavailability. People say the word bioavailability, prove it. Do a PK study, do a blood study, show how much actually gets into the body, how fast, how long, and how it's metabolized out of the body in a PK study. Spend your $25,000, $35,000, do a study, because there's too many people talking about that word bioavailability, and there's no information to back it up. We're one of the few companies that have done it in the cannabis industry outside the pharmaceutical industry. Secondly, the problem with bioavailability studies is it shows what gets into the blood. It doesn't show at the receptor level. And that's my pet peeve. So you get into the blood, congratulations. Is it going to get past the blood-brain barrier into the endocannabinoid system? Now, whenever you take, this is how it relates to intranasal. Whatever form of cannabis you take, normal ingestion, inhalation, interoral, it goes to the blood first. Only 1% of the cannabinoids that reach the blood system pass the blood-brain barrier because of the size and the lipophilic nature of the cannabinoids. So there's a gigantic amount of research now for N2B, nose-to-brain delivery. There are passageways in the nose, in the olfactory zone, in the trigeminal nerve area that go directly into the brain, bypassing the blood-brain barrier. We're one of the few companies that have actually ready to introduce a commercial product for nose-to-brain delivery of cannabinoids. This is one of the devices we've had to design to enable to get cannabis from here to there. It's not that easy.
Spraying cannabis at your brain.
You can't
I'm
spray,
still
but you
convinced
can't
at what it is,
but you
yeah.
can't do a spray. You cannot do a spray.
Right.
A spray only goes to the front of the nose.
Okay.
You have to shoot it up high into the nose.
Right.
So
the
there's like
brain.
50. There's like I'll tell you something. Yeah, there's 60 studies on intranasal is great for delivery. No one thought about the damn device they're making yet.
Right.
Only a few companies have said, well, we have no way of delivering it. They get nebulizers, so much pressure, doesn't pass the restrictive nasal valve. So we have introduced and we've been testing intranasal nose-to-brain delivery, primarily for the recreational market as an alternative inhalation. Onset of actions, 90 seconds, and it feels different.
Right.
So it's kind of an interesting way. We also look at this as a biotech company involved in pharmacology for the application of brain medication. Like John McCain died of glioblastoma. Part of the reasons are you can't treat brain disease because you can't get the medicines into the bloodstream that pass the blood-brain barrier. With this kind of device, in the right encapsulations, with the right mucoadhesiveness, because you got cilia that drag it down their throat. Intranasal is very hard delivery because a lot of things it has to stick, but it has to be fluid enough to pass. And we're very honored, I think, in the next several months to be the first company, maybe in the world, to introduce a nose-to-brain delivery system, and it'll be in the cannabis industry.
That's awesome. Congratulations. So something that happens a lot with really smart people developing really cool products is that they'll come up with something amazing and then nobody will understand what they're talking about. What we've experienced in our company is that it's really tough to get people to listen to you long enough to understand the thing and then get them to convert to a customer. You're all here because you're interested in science, so it's a little bit easier and we can get a little bit deeper. But I'm interested to hear, maybe we'll start with Michael. How do you handle teaching people about these sort of high technology, high science concepts that will improve their lives and convince them that you're not full of crap?
Yeah, it's a very good question, right? There's a lot of crap on the internet, so you gotta cut through some of that stuff, right? A lot of fake news, as people call it. So how to get through the fake news? Customer education is something we've really had to look at in our space, because you can create a product out there, and people ask you, well, why is yours better than this? And how do you educate them? You have to come out with interesting, for example, articles or things you have to do, press releases you have to do, educate on your website. We also take part in having educational sessions in our space in Toronto where we have people over and we talk about what benefits of vaporization are. A lot of it too has to do with online video. So we do some videos for our products. And another thing is through customer support. So we have a 1-800 numbers for 2 of our brands, and we have to educate customers online. So a lot of times we're dealing with customer service. A lot of times it's not the product, it's the user. It's a user error where someone doesn't know how to use the product. We have to educate them on how the product works. Thanks to the internet right now, quite a few people are very familiar with vaporization. I'm sure everybody here knows what vaporization is, so we don't have to go into it. But we've released this new product here called Higher, which is for dabbing. Anybody who dabbing is? Where dabbing is? Okay. So we've introduced this product for dabbing. It's a portable e-nail that gets rid of the torch. You don't have to torch your glass anymore to use concentrates. It's full temp stabilized from 330 up to 900 degrees. So we're essentially looking at bringing the Tesla mentality to the extracts, where you can use all electric, no combustion. But the consumers are like, I don't get it. What does it do? Do I still have to use a torch on it? I'm like, no, you don't. You just plug it in, you turn it on, it's powered. But that's educating consumers on how does that product work. So we find with something like that, it's more tricky because you're trying to change an established industry that people seem to understand, that dabbing requires a torch and an iPhone in my calibrated hand that I hold over my hot nail to know when it's like the right temperature. So I find it's not easy, an uphill battle, and we have to just keep at it. And I think having all the different support mechanisms out there, like customer service, online support, video content, I think that's really important, and also in person, such as trade shows like this and conferences that are really key for getting your message across.
Yeah, to touch on that user error piece, Dr. Kent and I had an interesting experience yesterday when we were grabbing lunch. He was trying to explain what a trochee was to someone, and in the middle of him trying to explain it, the person just put the whole thing in their mouth and started chewing on it, this 50-milligram bar of trochee. You should never put drugs in your mouth until the guy who makes them is done telling you how they work. Never, ever don't do that. So going back to our topic earlier about the stifled innovation in the cannabis industry and how we are kind of playing catch up at this point now that we have a little bit of money to go after these problems and a little bit of freedom to go after these problems. One thing that I find very interesting and that we all discussed yesterday was how the cannabis companies that are doing cool things aren't really inventing cool things. They're borrowing them from other industries and bringing them into our industry and repurposing them for cannabis. So I'm interested to hear from all the panelists, what industries do you look at that you borrow technology from? What other companies do you look at that you borrow technology from? Jules, do you want to start us off? We can just go down the line.
So in looking at developing new products and in looking at the cannabis market 10, 20, 30 years from now, a lot of what I look towards is biotechnology, the medical industry overall, specifically medical companies who are looking towards preventative medicine, not necessarily fixing a problem that someone has already developed, but looking at different biomarkers, as we have on this panel right now, which is very exciting for me, to determine what you might be facing 10, 20 years down the lines with regards to your health, your own personal health. Parsley Health, they have a location in San Francisco, New York, and I believe LA. They do a partnership where you come in and you look at everything, the 360 look at your personal body, what you eat, what you drink, how you exercise, what your body is consisted of, and that varies from person to person, which is why cannabis use, even with a consistent product, varies from person to person. And so in developing new technology and new products, it's looking at those types of things. For me personally, preventative measures, taking microdoses of different medicines from an early onset, just to help look at where you're going personally and try to adjust for that. And I think there's a lot of, Len, I'm very excited to hear about what you're doing. I mean, that's incredible and something that we would love to partner with to look at when people take sublingual cannabis, when people take different terpenes, what different cannabinoids do in the body per person. That's fascinating and something that I think everyone, what it really comes down to is that what we're talking about right now is creating the best information to empower consumers. Consumers need to take on their own education in these types of, almost in any industry, And a lot of what technology is doing is empowering us to do that ourselves. And so I'm really excited and looking at, the medical industry and honestly the cannabis industry itself, what other people are doing in cannabis.
Awesome. Dr. Kent.
Well, you brought up some great points. In functional medicine, I see this adaptogenic herb in its different formulations, its different technologies, routes of administration, stepping into a preventative role, just like taking a good fish oil, on a daily basis. There's certain things that are genetics with knowledge of those SNPs or single nuclear polymorphisms. If we have that information 20 years earlier, we can avoid many of the disease states that we're currently reacting to in medicine today. Real simple thing, which still hasn't been addressed well, is in type 2 diabetes. There's, and I've been complaining about this since '83 when I graduated from UCSF. Fasting insulin is a 15 to 20 year predictor of type 2 diabetes down the road. When we take a look at type 2 diabetes in regular medicine, we're doing blood sugar looks. Once that starts spilling over from our blood into our urine, that's really the end stage starting of diabetes. When we had an opportunity to look at this very damaging condition 10 to 20 years earlier, with looking at our genetics and looking at our uniqueness in this world and how we express ourselves, the more you learn about yourself, the more you recognize that those environmental or lifestyle factors have an influence on your phenotypic expression, how your genes react to the world. You're going to find that you can control things much better. And cannabis, being a disease state modifying adaptogenic herb, is one of the greatest things that we need to start incorporating safely into our lifestyle.
That's great, yeah. Proactive versus reactive is definitely where we need to move to, not just as an industry, but as a society. We need to start getting better at not developing the condition, and then we don't even have to treat it, That's great. Michael, what industries or companies do you look at that influence or inspire what you do within your work? And we're starting to run out of time, so I'll ask the rest of the panelists to keep it short.
All right, so I'll keep this short. What inspired me to get into the vaporizer space was I've always had a passion for manufacturing. I used to work in toys and create toys, kids' toys, and be in robotics. And what I found was a lot of the stringent requirements in toy testing and to make toy products for kids, we brought into our vaporizing manufacturing. There's a hell of a lot of testing that's involved to make a product that's safe for kids. So we brought that into our manufacturing practices. We have our own integrated, fully medically approved manufacturing facility under ISO 13485. So what we create now is our medical devices. We believe in bringing higher standards to the industry. We're looking to the future as we love the fact that connected world with iPhones and Androids, and our hardware is Bluetooth, it's smart, it collects data, it's automated. We believe in the whole AI systems and big data, looking at the analytics of the data being collected. What do you do with the data? How do we start processing the data so we can gain much more knowledge much quicker about how really useful cannabis is. We all know it is, but we want to start really getting analytics behind it and using a lot of technologies that these panelists are working on together to really drive this industry forward at a much more accelerated pace than it's been going in the past few years.
Awesome. Started making toys for kids, now you're making toys for big kids.
It's still a robot because it performs a task.
Yeah, awesome. Len.
They have fake news in Canada too? I'll try to make it really simple. I look at modeling. So I look at the past, and I also try to look at the future. So from the past, I look at compounding pharmacists. What do we used to do? How do we make this a personalized experience so we're not in this big pharma machine that there's a pill to fix everything? It's a customized experience. So how about being able to go to a dispensary or your pharmacist with your own personal prescription for your own personal medicine, whether it's a wellness medicine that you're taking as a preventative, like a nutraceutical, or it's something to address anxiety or pain, or maybe to mitigate an experience to make sure that you don't have a bad experience, or you want to go to a movie and laugh. How do you get your own personal medicine? So if you're going to a compounding type of pharmacist and they're able, with your own personal prescription, to be able to create your own personal medicine, that's kind of what I see the future being. So all these people are creating amazing technology, starting off with a baseline, and as Dr. Kant said, you know, our bodies want to heal. We have to give it the right medicine and the right nutrients and the right environment to help our bodies heal itself. So everything starts with these inflammations, and they send signals. We need to address the root cause of those things so we can have a better quality of life. As Dr. Kent was saying in their studies, when people have a better quality of life, they start feeling less pain. They start being more active. They start getting out there. Their mental state changes. So looking at how the pharmaceutical industry is able to control dosing and be able to have higher standards, we have to raise our standards in everything that we do, because until we do that, that stigma is still attached. So we have to be able to look at what the past was, that kind of profile of customized medicine, and then look in the future to raise our standards and make this really a truly great wellness product that it really is, and incorporate it in your daily use.
Awesome. Thanks, Len. Dr. Kaufman.
One thing I wanted to add, I was a co-director of a life extension medical clinic, the first one in North America. Type 2 diabetes. Blood sugar is your enemy. That's one thing I think most people agree with. And just on a practical thing, metformin is a relatively inexpensive drug that helps control blood sugar. So as one gets older, they may want to think about that just as a prophylaxis for anti-aging.
Well, it's actually used in anti-aging too. Works positively on our sirtuin gene.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention, I applaud you for bringing up type 2 diabetes, which is people really understand that. In any case, in our company, as a biotech company for delivery, we first began looking at the toxicity of drugs. Some of the drugs, in order to treat people, are so toxic they cause side effects. So they spent millions of dollars developing different types of delivery technologies to minimize their effects. We were also looking at the fact that in our company's past, we were doing nutraceutical delivery. Most of the nutraceuticals coming from herbs had very poor delivery characteristics. So upon looking at the pharmaceutical companies and their millions of dollars, we went about and created our own kind of nanoparticle, specifically a cookie cutter nanoparticle. We're not treating cancer, we're delivering smart nanoparticles. So with these nanoparticles that have an easy ability, they can encapsulate any number of cannabinoids, terpenes, pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals in a little lipid shell and deliver them in the body specifically to particular sites. So we really began looking at the pharmaceutical industry, because we know ultimately if we're going to be accepted as medicine, we're going to have to play on their terms. They're going to want PK studies. They're going to want to show how we can be effective. Currently, we're involved with a research project with a physician at UCLA testing helping improve a painful medication that has a delivery system that's so painful. We're trying to see if cannabis can help. So there's a lot of research going on in the background outside of the FDA, who has a stranglehold on research. If you want to do FDA-based research, it's not worth it in time in the United States. In Israel, Australia, other places you can do it. But you can do things on a state level, on a clinical level to move forward. So we're basically based on taking pharmaceutical models and making technology that rivals them and satisfies, and in many cases, improves upon what they're doing.
Yeah, let's take some market share from them. Yeah. Yes. All right, so we've got a little bit of time for a quick Q&A. Does anybody have any questions for our panel of Canada geniuses? All right, I'm not sure how we're going to do this. I'll bring you the mic. We're going to try this out. That's great. You have a very loud voice. Let's do this.
I'm curious, as we increase delivery mechanisms to make it more bioavailable, we've
Who wants to take that one?
I will. I mean, I think the first thing is, if you know the amount of what you're delivering in the form you're delivering it, it's not a matter of toxicity. And secondly, one of my problems I have actually is with THC by itself. It may be neuroinflammatory in high amounts by itself without the CBD to control inflammation. So there is the potential for extraction technologies and delivery systems to make something so bioavailable out of the plant as a single cannabinoid that it's unchecked. However, in what you're saying about delivery, well, obviously, inhalation gives you a self-limiting method of controlling it. There are people, unfortunately, who don't have companies that don't understand the pharmacokinetics of it and can take too much. But for us, we want to be able to deliver as much as possible to those receptors with more bioactivity, actually. So actually, we can decrease dosages and get a stronger effect with our delivery technology than just doing the shotgun approach of taking too much that has effects on other receptors besides the target receptors.
Can I just add to that? Real
Yeah,
quick?
yeah.
So, just to add, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Terpenes taken in higher doses can be toxic. So, when people are creating their chemistry in their labs and really don't have any background doing that, that definitely can cause harm. So we need standards for everyone to follow. The second thing is drug interaction. CBDs everywhere. You can go to Amazon, buy, 1,000 milligrams. Well, there is a lot of interaction between CBDs and uptake inhibitor, especially if you're consuming, anti-anxiety or antidepressant medication, because they're competing for the same exact channels. So just because, it's not a cure-all. You have to, it's a personal experience. You have to be able to educate yourself on what you're putting in your body. If you don't know, make sure that you look at test results, make sure you work with a healthcare professional, and understand that if you're taking other things and putting in your body, there could have a negative effect while using cannabis as well.
Great, thank you. Did that answer your question? Cool. Any other questions?
Going off the whole dosing thing, you mentioned 10 milligrams is like a standard dose, and I think it sounds nice because 10 is a round number. But is there anything like to prove that 10 milligrams is a starting dose, or is there anything, like what do you see creating a more realistic dose for someone that is scalable? Because 10 milligrams seems like it was just like, let's make it 10. And is there anything behind that, and where do you see it going?
How do we define the perfect dose?
So I think 10 milligrams came from the industry creating 10 milligrams as the standard dose. I think it's just a timeline. Historically, 10 milligrams was what recommended doses were. As we move into more bioavailability, look, I take 2 milligrams. I can't handle a 10 milligram dose of anything. 2 milligrams with the right product is plenty for me personally. And so in looking towards what the correct dosage amounts will be going forward, I think that depends person to person, and I would venture any of these gentlemen who are working on dose specifics and could answer it where they believe it's going. I think it's microdosing personally.
One of the things that have happened are the states kind of defined by dosaging packaging. So they state 10 milligrams is the maximum dosage. So people say, we'll make 10 milligrams. However, what we have found in our type of technology are that we're getting more bioactivity and more delivery with using nanotechnology. So if we had delivered a 10 milligram dose intranasally for the average person, it's going to be way too much. So we had to scale down expectations.
Right.
So it's really going to depend on the product, the method of delivery, for what a dosage is, and the individual, because that's the second line. And as I said, what other drugs are you taking? Are you a multiple drug user? Are you having a, is your endocannabinoid system up to snuff to be able to have the receptors be active? So there's a lot of, and that becomes too technical for the average person. I mean, smaller is better to begin with.
What we find just going back to the group of physicians that have been in the Bay Area practicing with cannabis medicine for 45 years, the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, which I'm a member of, our guiding dosing just broadly speaking, for a patient that is naive to cannabis is 2.5 milligrams of the neutral form of THC. You can go higher with any dose of CBD because we haven't found a threshold yet, even using nanotechnology, that we've seen toxicity, but clearly the psychoactive component and the 11-hydroxy metabolite of delta-9 it can be problematic in patients. So if you're adding THC, I always like to have CBD loaded on first, and with that protocol, we went from having bad experiences in dosing patients to no bad experiences. So start low and go up slow.
Yeah.
Just one more thing on the 10 milligram. This was actually a legislative way to control packaging. It had nothing to do with any science whatsoever. The governor of Colorado spoke at a meeting in California and said that was one of the biggest mistakes they made is not to regulate the packaging when they legalized in Colorado. So he said, we suggest using 10, and that's how it became an industry standard. There's no science behind it. There are guides published. There's a green book in Israel that talks about milligram per kilogram. There's a bunch of other guides, Ethan Russo, Dr. Mishulam, Project CBD, Martin Lee. We have some on our site. So there are guides out there, but as everybody said, less is more. Start titrating low and work slowly.
You know, we've actually done some research on our transdermal delivery platform as analgesics. And we've been finding typically we get a strong analgesic effect with between 15 to 20 milligrams of THC delivered into the skin. At 20, some people will start to experience, I won't say psychotropic effects, but they're not used to it. So for transdermal, for analgesic effects, as an alternative to opiates, you have to realize when you have really bad pain, you take enough opiates that you're in outer space. And people don't understand, if you have really bad cancer pain, you'll probably have to take so much cannabis, there are psychotropic effects to relieve the pain, because it's rather being pain or rather being a little high is a trade-off, but I think most people will accept the fact that they're in such pain, it's so excruciating, they'll put up with the side effects that at least many people find pleasurable.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges that we're going to see as we continue to develop products that have a higher bioavailability is getting people to understand that you don't need to take 10 milligrams anymore. I think there's kind of this consumer assumption out there that that's the dose, that's what you need, and if you come out with a product that's 2.5 milligrams but feels like 10 milligrams, you're going to have a tough time getting them to buy it. So that goes back to that consumer education piece. How do you really communicate to people who you have for 3-5 seconds at a time, you know?
Can I just
Yeah.
just add to that really quick? Well, I was in a panel, or I was listening to a panel yesterday that talked about marketing, and people are looking for, they come in and they want the 25, 30% THC product. The thing that's missing, I think, is the terpene profile that works with you. So for me personally, my favorite Chemobar that worked best for me, that strain, was about 16% THC, but it was so rich in expressed terpenes that work specifically for trying to achieve my experience. So you not only dosing-wise titrate, but also look at the complete plant. When you're putting that in your body, figure out what's right for you, and it doesn't have to be high THC or CBD. There's a whole bunch of different therapeutic chemicals and stuff in this plant that you may want to consider as well when medicating.
Awesome. So we've just got a couple minutes left, and I want to bookend this with one more. It looks like we got some questions. Let's do one more question. How about you?
Hi. You've all referenced this concept about customization, via pharmacy, putting into a pharmacy with prescriptions, and for the partially held. To me, microdosing is reminiscent of the mass customization effort which happened in packaged goods 30 years ago. And so my question is, have you seen anything to get us to
So if I can try to rephrase that a little bit. So Len, what you're getting out of your data is a custom profile for every single person that uses your platform, right? What do we do with that information? Like, how do they get those products?
It's everybody on this panel. So if you look at your genetic profile, there's ratio suggestions and terpene suggestions that you should consume more of or avoid. Because if you have the propensity towards anxiety being expressed in a certain situation, and you know that limonene can trigger, cortisol, serotonin in your bloodstream, that's something you may want to avoid. Everybody here on this panel and everybody's creating products, that's information that is the roadmap to start creating those products. So it's not individualized medicine yet. We have to get to that point. But it's more personalized, meaning that it'll be in, I hate to use the word, but buckets, maybe. So it's anybody that has a certain type of genetic profile. When you're consuming something that you want to address anxiety and you have this genetic propensity towards that, these are some of the formulations that will work best. And it's up to all these people and everybody else who's creating products to be able to learn from that and create products that are associated with those specific cannabinoid and terpene ratios. And all these people on the panel are already creating some of these products already. They're already creating products that have a specific, terpene and cannabinoid profile. Without the difficulty that we have as an industry is making claims. So we want to make sure that we avoid the word claims or recommendations, and we use suggestion and guide people in the right direction. And the way it's going to work for all of us, before we're able to all do clinical trials, is we're going to get a feedback loop. So just because we have a certain suggestion for you, the feedback loop that comes from the field is, are you using it? Is it working for you? And then at some point, we're going to measure your endogenous endocannabinoid levels. So we're going to see what is your baseline anandamide. We're going to see what's your baseline 2AG. You're going to consume your cannabis medicine, and we're going to measure that again to see if it's really, truly working at the cellular level. And that's the products will be created for that.
All right, Michael's got something quick to say, then we're going to land this thing on time.
That's where we're building part of the complete hardware software platform ecosystem is that we have the device which can track your dosage, we have the app which is self-reporting, and then we can look at starting building data as to, okay, I've worked, for example, Endocanna, here's my profile, I've tested these strains, and here's my end result for it, or not the strains, or these strains, these building blocks, these chemovars, right? So then we can start getting data and start looking at, okay, how, does this data work with other people? Do other people have the same issues? Do other people report other findings? So it's just a way of building the data and seeing how each person's different body type reacts to what's out there. And we need to really look at the data side and start building that up.
All right. Thank you to the panelists. Everybody give them a round of applause. Thank you for your attention. Julianne, Dr. Kent, Michael, Len, Dr. Kaufman. We'll be around.